There is something inside all of us that longs to be heard, to be understood, to have someone acknowledge our pain. When life feels heavy, our first instinct is often to run to people, friends, family, even strangers, hoping that by sharing our burdens we will find relief. But what if I told you that constantly speaking about your problems may be doing more harm than good? What if the answer to your struggles is not found in telling others, but in bringing everything before God? We live in a time when people are quick to vent their frustrations, whether in personal conversations or on social media. Problems are aired out in public spaces, seeking validation, sympathy, or just a listening ear. But how often do those conversations truly bring peace? How often does talking about our problems to the wrong people lead to solutions? More often than not, it brings more confusion, more discouragement. Sometimes it's even betrayal. Scripture reminds us that our help does not come from men, but from the Lord. He is the one who hears, understands, and responds with wisdom. The danger in constantly sharing our struggles is that we begin to place our hope in human solutions rather than in divine intervention. People may listen, but they cannot fix what only God can. They may sympathize, but they do not hold the power to change our circumstances. When we put too much trust in people, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Jesus himself showed us the right example. When he was troubled, he withdrew to pray. He did not seek comfort in crowds or pity from men. He took his burdens to the Father, knowing that true strength comes from communion with God. If the Son of God depended on prayer rather than human support, how much more should we? There is wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Some things are meant to be shared, but not with just anyone. Not everyone who listens is capable of giving godly counsel. Some will only spread your troubles as gossip, while others may offer advice that pulls you further away from God's will. This is why it is essential to take everything to the Lord first. If he leads you to share, do so with someone spiritually mature and trustworthy. Speaking about your problems repeatedly can also weaken your faith. The more you focus on your struggles, the less you focus on God's power. Instead of declaring his promises, you are declaring your pain. Instead of magnifying his strength, you are magnifying your weakness. But when you choose to trust in silence, when you surrender your troubles at his feet without seeking human validation, you show that your faith is in him alone. Let today be the day you make a change. Before you run to people, run to God. Before you speak, pray. Let your confidence be in him, and he will strengthen your heart, guide your steps, and give you peace that no human conversation ever could. There is a place where every burden can be lifted, every sorrow can be comforted, and every wound can be healed. That place is in the presence of God. In a world that encourages people to speak, vent, and express every emotion publicly, many have forgotten the power of taking their problems directly to him. We have been conditioned to believe that relief comes when others understand our pain, when someone sympathizes with our situation, or we find a friend who will listen. But the truth is, there is no greater refuge than the presence of God. He alone understands, he alone sustains, and he alone has the power to bring true peace. From the beginning of time, God has shown himself to be a refuge for his people. When Adam and Eve sinned and felt shame, they hid, but God still called out to them. When Noah was surrounded by a world of wickedness, God gave him a place of safety. When David was pursued by enemies, he cried out to God, and God delivered him. Over and over again, we see a pattern. Those who run to God in their distress find strength, but those who seek human solutions often end up more broken than before. The mistake many make is thinking that because people are physically present, they are the best place to run to. But people, no matter how much they care, are limited. They can listen, but they may not fully understand. They can advise, but their wisdom is imperfect. They can comfort, but their words cannot reach the deepest places of the soul where healing is truly needed. Only God can do that. Only God sees the whole picture, understands the depths of your heart, and knows exactly what you need, even when you do not have the words to express it. Prayer is not a last resort, it should be our first response. When troubles come, the first instinct should not be to call a friend or post about it, but to enter into the secret place with God. In that place, there is no judgment, no misunderstanding, and no limitations. There's only perfect love, perfect wisdom, and perfect peace. When you tell God your problems, you are not just speaking into the air, you are speaking to the one who has the power to change your situation. You are bringing your burdens to the only one who can carry them fully. Many people struggle with feeling unheard or unseen. They want someone to notice their pain, to validate their emotions, or to offer encouragement. But what if the greatest encouragement comes not from hearing someone say, "I understand," but from knowing that the God who created the heavens and the earth knows every detail of your life? What if instead of seeking attention from others, you sought intimacy with Him? The presence of God is not just a place of comfort, it is a place of transformation. When you bring your burdens to Him, He does not just listen, He works in ways beyond what you can imagine. Consider how Jesus approached difficult moments. When He faced the weight of His mission, He did not go to the crowd seeking sympathy. He withdrew to pray. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when His soul was in agony, He did not vent to His disciples, He fell before the Father. This was not because He had no one to talk to, but because He knew where true strength comes from. If Jesus, the Son of God, relied on prayer rather than human comfort, how much more should we? Some may say, "But I need someone to talk to. I feel alone." God knows the human heart, and He does not ask us to walk through life without support. However, there is a difference between seeking wise counsel and constantly sharing problems with others as a means of comfort. There is wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Some burdens are meant to be shared, but others are meant to be taken directly to God. If He leads you to speak to someone, it should be a person who will encourage you spiritually, not just someone who will listen passively or offer worldly. Faith grows in silence. It grows in those moments when you resist the urge to broadcast your struggles and instead choose to kneel before God. It grows when you decide to trust Him rather than seek validation from others. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come in the secret place, in the quiet moments when no one else sees or hears, but heaven is listening. When you develop the habit of bringing everything to God first, you will find that you no longer feel the need to seek human approval. You will no longer be bound by the desire for others to understand, because you will know that God understands. There is peace that surpasses all understanding, but it is only found in God's presence. Those who depend on people for comfort will always be searching, always needing another conversation, always longing for another moment of human attention. But those who make God their refuge will find a peace that remains, a strength that sustains, and a confidence that nothing in this world can shake. People often search for solutions in places that cannot truly help them. When difficulties arise, the natural instinct is to seek comfort in others' family, friends, or even social media. There is a deep longing to be heard, to be understood, to receive encouragement from those around us. However, while people may provide temporary relief, they cannot fix what only God can. The comfort they offer is often fleeting, and their advice, no matter how well-intentioned, is imperfect. The only lasting solution comes from turning to God, the one who truly understands and has the power to bring real change. Throughout life, there will be moments of deep pain, confusion, and disappointment. In those times, it is tempting to share struggles with anyone willing to listen. Some do this out of desperation, believing that talking about their problems will make them feel lighter. Others do it in hopes of receiving advice, looking for a solution through human wisdom. But the reality is that people, no matter how much they care, cannot provide the peace that only God can. They may listen, but they cannot heal. They may give their opinion, but they cannot see the full picture of what God is doing. Many have experienced the disappointment of confiding in someone only to receive an unhelpful or even harmful response. Some people, instead of offering encouragement, may respond with judgment, skepticism, or even gossip. Others may offer advice based on their own experiences, but what worked for one person may not be what God intends for another. When people become the primary source of guidance, it leads to confusion, frustration, and even further hurt. This is why it is so important to turn to God first. God does not offer partial understanding. He sees every detail of your situation. He knows your heart, your struggles, and your future. Unlike people who can only guess at the right path, God knows the way perfectly. When you take your problems to Him, you are not just talking to someone who listens. You are speaking to the one who has the power to change things. He is not limited by human perspective, and He does not rely on past experiences to guide His wisdom. He knows exactly what you need, even before you ask. The Bible is filled with examples of people who placed their trust in God instead of men. One powerful example is Hannah, the mother of Samuel. She was deeply troubled, unable to bear children, and ridiculed by those around her. She could have gone to others for comfort, but instead she poured out her soul before the Lord. She wept and prayed, trusting that only God could change her situation. And He did. He heard her cry and answered her prayer. Her story is a reminder that the greatest breakthroughs happen when problems are brought before God, not when they are merely discussed with people. Another example is King Jehoshaphat. When faced with a massive enemy army, he could have sought military alliances or listened to the fears of his people. Instead, he turned to God in prayer, declaring that they did not know what to do, but that their eyes were on him. God responded by fighting the battle for them, bringing victory in a way that no human strategy could have accomplished. This is the power of seeking God first. He provides solutions that go beyond human understanding. It is important to acknowledge that God can use people to provide wisdom and encouragement. However, not everyone is meant to be a voice in your life. Some people speak out of their own fears, doubts, or personal experiences rather than from a place of spiritual discernment. Others may unintentionally lead you away from God's plan by offering advice that seems logical but does not align with His will. This is why discernment is key. If God leads you to seek counsel, it should be from someone who is spiritually mature, rooted in Scripture, and capable of pointing you back to Him. Trusting in God rather than people also strengthens your faith. When you learn to rely on Him alone, your dependence on human validation begins to fade. You no longer feel the need to be constantly understood by others because you rest in the assurance that God knows you completely. You no longer seek approval from people because you are secure in the love and wisdom of the one who created you. Faith grows strongest in the moments when you choose to believe in God's ability rather than in human advice. It is in those quiet moments of surrender, when you lay everything before Him without seeking external validation, that you experience His power in the most profound way. When you stop looking for people to fix your problems and start trusting that God already has a plan, you position yourself to receive His best. Instead of exhausting yourself by sharing your struggles with others and hoping for the right response, bring everything to the Lord in prayer. Let Him be the one you run to first. Let Him be the one who carries your burdens. People may have good intentions, but only God can provide the wisdom, direction, and peace that truly sustains. Words have incredible power. They can build up or tear down, strengthen or weaken, bring clarity or cause confusion. What we say not only impacts others, but also shapes our own faith and mindset. In moments of struggle, it is natural to want to talk about what we are going through. However, not every problem needs to be shared with others. Constantly speaking about our struggles can open doors to unnecessary negativity, lead to gossip, and even make our problems feel bigger than they really are. This is why it is so important to guard both our words and our spirit. Many people believe that talking about their problems over and over again will bring them relief. They assume that the more they express their frustrations, the lighter they will feel. But the truth is, constantly speaking about the same issues can actually deepen the pain. Words reinforce thoughts. The more we talk about our problems, the more we meditate on them, allowing them to take up more space in our hearts and minds. Instead of speaking life and faith, we keep feeding our struggles, giving them more power over us. The Bible warns about the dangers of an unguarded tongue. Proverbs 18:21 tells us that death and life are in the power of the tongue. What we say can either align with God's truth or magnify our difficulties. When we keep repeating our problems without seeking solutions from God, we are essentially declaring our fears and doubts rather than His promises. Instead of saying, "I don't know how I'm going to get through this," we should be saying, "God is in control, and I trust Him." Instead of saying, "I feel so lost," we should declare, "The Lord is my shepherd, and He will guide me." Another danger of speaking too much about our struggles is that it invites the wrong kind of attention. Not everyone who listens to your problems has good intentions. Some people listen out of curiosity rather than a desire to help. Others may pretend to care but later use what you shared against you. There are even those who take pleasure in hearing about others' difficulties, not to encourage them but to make themselves feel better in comparison. This is why it is important to be cautious about who you open up to. In addition to this, repeatedly sharing problems with others can lead to gossip. Sometimes when we vent our frustrations about certain people or situations, we may unintentionally spread negativity. What begins as a personal struggle can quickly turn into criticism, slander, or even bitterness. Words have a way of traveling further than we expect, and what we say in private can easily become public. This is why James 1:19 reminds us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Jesus Himself demonstrated the wisdom of guarding words in the Spirit. Throughout His ministry, He faced opposition, betrayal, and suffering, yet He did not go around complaining. He did not spend time explaining His pain to those who could not help Him. Instead, He remained focused on His purpose, choosing His words carefully and entrusting Himself to the Father. Even in the face of false accusations, He remained silent, knowing that His strength came from God, not from trying to justify Himself before men. There are times when it is necessary to speak, but wisdom lies in knowing when and to whom. If God places someone in your life to offer godly counsel, speaking to them in confidence can be beneficial. However, even then, the focus should not be on endless complaining, but on seeking wisdom and encouragement. The goal of any conversation should be to find direction in God, not just to vent emotions. Guarding your words also protects your spirit. What you speak affects not only those around you, but also your own heart. The more you declare negativity, the more it settles into your spirit. But when you choose to speak words of faith, even in difficult times, you build spiritual strength. This is why David, in the midst of his trials, often spoke to his own soul, saying, "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Put your hope in God." Instead of allowing his struggles to define him, he reminded himself of who God is. Faith is strengthened not by constant complaining, but by choosing to trust God even when things are hard. Speaking less and praying more allows God to work in ways that human conversation never could. There is a supernatural peace that comes when we stop focusing on how big our problems are and start focusing on how big our God is. When we guard our words and our spirit, we position ourselves to hear from Him more clearly, to grow in faith, and to walk in the confidence that He is in control. Silence is a powerful expression of trust. In a world that constantly encourages people to share every thought, struggle, and emotion, there is great wisdom in knowing when to remain silent. It is easy to believe that speaking about problems repeatedly will lead to resolution. But sometimes the greatest breakthroughs happen when you take your burdens to God and wait on Him instead of seeking human validation. Trusting in silence is not about ignoring your struggles, it is about surrendering them to the one who can truly handle them. When faced with difficulties, the first instinct for many is to talk about them. People seek comfort from friends, vent on social media, or look for sympathy from those around them. But how often does this bring lasting peace? More often than not, excessive talking leads to more stress, frustration, and sometimes even regret. When you constantly speak about your struggles, you are keeping them alive in your mind. Instead of moving forward in faith, you are reinforcing the weight of your burdens. The Bible is filled with examples of people who experienced God's power when they remained silent and trusted in Him. One of the most powerful examples is the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. They were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the sea with no visible way of escape. Fear overwhelmed them, and many cried out in panic. But Moses spoke words of faith, saying, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And what happened? God parted the sea, making a way where there was none. Their deliverance did not come from endless discussion about their fears. It came from trusting in God and allowing Him to work. Another example is Jesus during His trial before Pilate. He was falsely accused, mocked, and questioned, yet He remained silent. He did not try to defend Himself with many words or argue with those who sought to destroy Him. His silence was not weakness, it was power. He knew that His mission was in the hands of the Father, and He did not need to justify Himself before men. His trust was in God's perfect plan. Remaining silent before the Lord does not mean doing nothing. It means bringing your struggles to Him in prayer and trusting that He is working even when you cannot see it. Too often people pray about their problems and then immediately seek out others to discuss the same issues. But true faith waits on God. True faith rests in the confidence that He hears and will respond in His perfect timing. Silence also protects you from making impulsive decisions. When people are overwhelmed by emotions, they often say things they later regret. Anger, frustration, and fear can cause words to be spoken that should have remained unspoken. This is why Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." There is wisdom in holding back words, especially in moments of deep struggle. Another reason silence is so powerful is that it allows you to hear God more clearly. When your mind is constantly filled with conversations, advice, and opinions from others, it becomes harder to recognize His voice. But when you choose to step away from the noise and sit in His presence, He begins to reveal things you may have never seen before. Elijah experienced this when he was in deep distress. God did not speak to him in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He spoke in a still, small voice. Sometimes the reason people struggle to find peace is that they are too distracted by their own words and the words of others. But when you quiet your heart and listen, you begin to hear God speak. Trusting in silence also builds spiritual maturity. It teaches patience and dependence on God rather than on immediate answers from people. Many times God allows seasons of silence to strengthen your faith. When you stop looking for human validation and wait on Him, you develop a deeper relationship with Him. You learn to lean on His word rather than on the opinions of others. In moments of trouble, ask yourself, do I trust God enough to be silent? Do I believe that He is working, even when I do not see the results immediately? True faith does not require constant reassurance from people. It finds rest in the presence of God. Choosing silence does not mean you do not care about your problems. It means you care enough to place them in the hands of the one who can truly handle them. When you trust in silence, you are making a declaration of faith that God is in control. And that is where true peace is found. Patience in suffering is one of the greatest marks of true faith. In a world that demands immediate solutions, it is difficult to wait on God when things are hard. Many people feel the urge to talk about their struggles because they want relief, closure, or sympathy. They believe that if they express their pain to others, the weight of it will lessen. But true peace does not come from venting, it comes from trusting in God's perfect timing. When you learn to endure trials with patience instead of constantly seeking human comfort, you open yourself to a deeper work of God in your life. Waiting on God is not easy. When problems arise, the natural response is to look for immediate answers. If a door does not open quickly, many start doubting, complaining, or seeking shortcuts. But God's ways are higher than human understanding, and His timing is perfect. The Bible is filled with examples of people who had to wait on God before receiving their breakthrough. Joseph, after receiving dreams of greatness, spent years as a slave and a prisoner before stepping into his destiny. David was anointed as king but had to endure many years of trials before taking the throne. Even Abraham, the father of faith, had to wait decades for God's promise of a son to be fulfilled. If they had focused on complaining instead of trusting, they would have missed God's plan. One of the biggest dangers of constantly talking about your problems is that it can make waiting on God even harder. The more you speak about your struggles, the more they consume your thoughts. Instead of fixing your eyes on God, you become more aware of your suffering. Instead of strengthening your faith, you may find yourself questioning why God has not moved yet. This is why patience and silence go hand in hand. When you resist the urge to speak constantly about your situation, you give yourself space to grow in trust and faith. Job is a powerful example of patience in suffering. He lost everything: his wealth, his family, and his health. Yet, in the midst of his pain, he did not run to people for validation. He did not try to make sense of his suffering by endlessly talking about it. Instead, he worshiped. He acknowledged his pain before God, but chose to trust Him rather than seek human answers. His friends, though well-meaning, offered poor advice. They tried to explain his suffering in human terms, but their words only added to his distress. In the end, Job's faith and patience were rewarded, and God restored what was lost. Patience in suffering also means accepting that God's plan may not always align with human expectations. Many people want instant relief, but God is more interested in transformation than in temporary comfort. He allows trials to refine faith, build character, and draw His people closer to Him. When you learn to wait on Him without constantly seeking human reassurance, you demonstrate true dependence on His wisdom. Jesus Himself showed perfect patience in suffering. As He prepared for the cross, He did not spend His time discussing His pain with the crowds. He did not complain about the betrayal of Judas or the denial of Peter. Instead, He withdrew to pray. He endured suffering with a heart fully surrendered to the will of the Father. Even when He was falsely accused and tortured, He remained silent, trusting in the plan that had been set before Him. If the Son of God chose patience and trust over endless discussions, how much more should we? There is great strength in waiting quietly on God. Isaiah 40:31 reminds us that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. When you refuse to let impatience lead you to constant conversation about your problems, you allow God to work in your heart. You grow in endurance and your faith deepens. Instead of becoming discouraged by how long the trial lasts, you begin to trust that God is using the waiting period for something greater. Some people may say, "But I need someone to talk to." While there is nothing wrong with seeking wise counsel, the key is balance. If speaking about your problems becomes a habit of complaining rather than an act of seeking guidance, it may be a sign that your trust is in people rather than in God. True peace does not come from venting to others, it comes from surrendering fully to the one who knows the end from the beginning. In times of suffering, ask yourself, am I waiting on God or am I looking for quick comfort from people? Am I trusting in His timing or am I letting frustration control my words? Faith is not proven in easy times. It is revealed in how you respond when answers are delayed. If you can endure suffering with patience and trust without constantly seeking human reassurance, you will see God's faithfulness in ways you never imagined. He is never late and He never fails. Your patience will not be in vain. There is a deep connection between faith and silence. Many believe that faith is demonstrated through constant words, praying loudly, declaring victory, or seeking encouragement from others. While there is power in speaking God's word, there is also great power in knowing when to be silent. True faith does not always need to be expressed through words. Sometimes it is revealed through quiet trust. When you stop feeling the need to talk about your problems constantly, you show that your confidence is in God, not in human opinions or sympathy. Faith is the ability to believe in what is unseen, to trust that God is working even when there is no visible proof. When people continually discuss their struggles with others, it often reveals an underlying doubt. They may be seeking reassurance, trying to figure out if things will truly work out. But faith does not require constant confirmation from people. It is the quiet assurance that God is in control. No matter what the circumstances look like, the more a person talks about their problems, the more they tend to dwell on their fears rather than on God's promises. Abraham is often called the father of faith, and his story is a powerful example of trusting in silence. When God promised him a son, he did not have immediate proof that the promise would be fulfilled. He had to wait for many years, and during that time there is no record of him constantly discussing his doubts or questioning God in front of others. Instead, he held on to the promise and walked in faith. Even when it seemed impossible, he remained silent before men and believed in his heart that God would do what he said. Another powerful example is Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel told her that she would give birth to the Savior, she did not run around telling everyone about it. Instead, Luke 2:19 says that she treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. She knew that God had spoken, and she did not need the validation of others to believe it. Her silence was not weakness, it was deep faith. There is a great temptation to seek approval or reassurance from people, especially when going through difficulties. Many want someone to tell them that everything will be okay, that their prayers will be answered, that they are making the right choices. But faith does not depend on human encouragement, it rests on the unshakable foundation of God's Word. If you truly believe that He is working in your life, you will not feel the need to convince others of it. Jesus demonstrated this kind of faith perfectly. When He faced opposition, false accusations, and even death, He did not try to justify Himself to those who misunderstood Him. He knew who He was and what the Father had planned. In Isaiah 53:7, it was prophesied that He would be oppressed and afflicted, yet He did not open His mouth. His silence was not a sign of defeat, it was the ultimate display of trust in God's plan. Choosing silence in times of trial does not mean ignoring problems or pretending they do not exist. It means placing full confidence in God instead of seeking constant human reassurance. It means resisting the urge to explain, defend, or justify yourself to those who may not even understand what God is doing in your life. Some battles are not meant to be fought with words, they are won through quiet trust and obedience. Silence is also a sign of spiritual maturity. Many people talk excessively about their struggles because they are still learning to trust God fully. But as faith deepens, there is less need to talk and more willingness to wait on the Lord. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is an act of faith. It is choosing to rest in God's promises rather than filling the air with words of doubt or frustration. This does not mean that speaking about challenges is always wrong. There is a time to seek counsel, a time to encourage others, and a time to declare God's truth. But when words become a substitute for true faith, they can be a hindrance rather than a help. Instead of talking about problems repeatedly, true faith prays, trusts, and waits. Faith is most powerful when it is quiet, steady, and unshaken by circumstances. It does not need to announce itself loudly or seek approval from others. When you reach a place where you no longer feel the need to talk about your problems all the time, it is a sign that your faith has matured. It shows that you trust God's plan more than human opinions. True faith rests in the confidence that God is working, even in silence.